One night in 1991, a 5-year-old girl named Izzy vanished from her bed in the middle of the night. Her window was open. Her bed was empty. There were no footprints, no signs of forced entry, just silence and a mother's scream echoing into the Portland darkness. For 9 long years, her mother Elaine lived with one question: what happened to my daughter? Then during a routine move, Elaine opened a box marked Izzy's favorites. Inside, she found a forgotten toy cassette recorder. When she pressed play, she heard something she was never meant to hear. A message that would blow open a cold case and expose a secret so horrifying it would haunt a nation. Welcome to Echo Stories. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories. Part 1, The Voice Inside the Toy. Elaine Rhodes never planned to play the recorder that night. She had just finished moving into a modest new apartment after finalizing her divorce from Charles, her ex-husband. The divorce, though painful, was inevitable. Izzy's disappearance had broken something between them. Now alone, Elaine began unpacking. One box marked Izzy's favorites stopped her cold. Inside were little treasures: a plush purple owl, tiny dresses folded with care, storybooks worn from bedtime readings. And at the bottom, a cheap red and white cassette recorder. It was dusty batteries, long dead. On a whim, Elaine cleaned the corrosion from the battery compartment and popped in new AAs. She pressed play. Static. Then a tiny voice. Testing, testing. This is Isabella Marie Rhodes, and I'm 5 years old. Elaine gasped. It had been nearly a decade since she'd heard her daughter's voice. She sobbed as Izzy babbled about preschool butterflies and her favorite stuffed animals. But then the tone shifted. A man's voice entered. Charles's voice. Izzy, come to the princess room when you're done. Remember what I promised. After we finish, we'll go to Toys R Us. Elaine froze. The princess room, what was that? Izzy didn't even like princesses. She loved dragons and animals. And after we finish, what? Elaine rewound and listened again. And again. And suddenly she knew something was very wrong. Part 2, The Night She Disappeared. To understand why the voice on the recorder mattered, you have to go back to May 3rd, 1991. Elaine tucked Izzy into bed around 8:30 p.m. Like always, she read The Very Hungry Caterpillar, kissed her forehead, and turned on the nightlight, shaped like a bunny. Izzy was 5. Sweet. Talkative. A child who never wandered far without holding her mother's hand. The next morning when Elaine went to wake her, the bed was cold. The window was open, screen pushed out. No shattered glass, no forced entry, just gone. Panic hit like a freight train. Police arrived, scouring the neighborhood. Helicopters flew. Dogs sniffed through parks, ravines, backyards. Nothing. Even Charles Izzy's father appeared shaken. He gave statements, cried on the local news. He said he'd slept through the night, claimed he hadn't seen or heard anything strange. For months, Elaine blamed herself. She wondered if she'd locked the window, if she should have gotten up at midnight when the cat meowed near the door. But no one suspected Charles. He was clean-cut, a respected dentist. The marriage crumbled, not because of fighting, but because of emptiness. Elaine couldn't look at him without seeing loss. And Charles, he never asked Elaine how she was doing. He just moved on. But now, 9 years later, hearing his voice on that tape, telling their missing daughter to come to the princess room, Elaine's skin crawled. The warmth in his tone wasn't fatherly. It was rehearsed, controlled. Elaine realized she had never heard that conversation because it happened without her there. She called the police. This time, they listened. Part 3, The Princess Room. Detectives reopened the case. The audio recording was analyzed and authenticated. It had not been altered. More chillingly, the tape included ambient noise, a faint hum in the background, and a metallic click like a lock turning. Elaine told police that princess room had never been a phrase Izzy used. It wasn't a playroom in their home. It was foreign to her. But when investigators questioned Charles, now remarried and living 2 towns over, he dismissed the tape. That was just us playing. I used to call her my little princess. It meant nothing. But his body language said otherwise. Detectives obtained a warrant to search his new home, and more importantly, a rural storage property he had owned since 1990, located on the edge of a tree-covered ravine. Inside the storage shed was a locked interior room, soundproofed, painted pink. The walls were lined with faded children's posters: Cinderella, Belle, Sleeping Beauty. In the corner, a small mattress with a dusty stuffed bunny sat on the floor. Next to it, a broken cassette recorder, and on the shelf, a row of VHS tapes labeled only with dates. Police seized everything. Inside one cabinet, they also found dozens of photos of a little girl. The timeline between 1990 and 90. Izzy and other girls. The FBI was called in. Charles Caldwell was arrested. Elaine was asked a single searing question. Do you want to know if we found any remains? She shook her head no, because deep down she already knew. Part 4, The Truth in the Tapes. Investigators cataloged over 60 hours of VHS footage recovered from the storage unit. Most were labeled by date, but a few had handwritten titles, Princess Routine Tea Time Promise. The content, sickening. They showed young girls, mostly filmed from a distance, being led into the princess room. In a few, Charles can be seen coaching the girls, Izzy among them, on how to respond to questions. He tells them to call him Uncle Mark. In one clip, Izzy hesitates when asked her name. She says softly, "My mommy says not to talk to strangers." He laughs. The recordings confirmed what authorities had feared. Charles Caldwell had abducted his own daughter, staged the scene to look like a break-in, and kept her hidden for years. But in 1994, the videos abruptly stop. No more recordings, no photos, no trace of Izzy past age 8. So where was she? Charles refused to speak. Even when faced with mountains of evidence, he only muttered, "She was too loud. I needed quiet." Cadaver dogs were brought in. In a shallow grave behind the property, beneath a collapsed section of concrete, they found human remains, later confirmed by dental records to be Izzy. Elaine identified the toy bunny found in the grave. It had once lived on Izzy's bed. Charles was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and possession of child pornography and second-degree murder. He received life in prison, no parole. Elaine sat through every minute of the trial, not for vengeance, but for the little girl who used to giggle into a tape recorder and say, "This is Izzy. I'm 5 years old." Part 5, A Voice That Endured. After the trial, Elaine brought home only one thing from the evidence locker. That little red cassette recorder. The tape still worked. She kept it in a glass case in her living room, not because she wanted to remember the horror, but because it was the only thing that held her daughter's unfiltered voice. A voice untouched by evil. A voice that helped uncover a lie. A voice that in the end brought justice. Elaine started speaking to parents groups, law enforcement agencies, and victim advocacy organizations. Her message was simple: trust your instincts and never let anyone convince you to forget. What saved the case wasn't technology. It wasn't a breakthrough in DNA. It was a mother refusing to throw away a child's toy, one that carried the key to the truth inside a tiny spool of tape. This story reminds us that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it sits at the dinner table, smiles in family photos. But truth has a way of leaking through like sound captured in a forgotten cassette. Subscribe to Echo Stories for more haunting mysteries, powerful reunions, and the stories that refuse to stay buried. Because in the end, it's not the loudest voices that bring justice. It's the quiet ones who never stop whispering.